in Korea.
The Asiatic crisis point becomes Korea.
On June 25th, 1950, North Korean troops crossed the 38th parallel. Within 2 days, they were on the outskirts of the South Korean capital, Seoul.
In evacuating the city of Seoul, I had taken out a shortwave radio with me, and the boys were operating that evening after I went to bed. And among other things, they were able to pick up the broadcast of President Truman's statement that he had decided to put American air and naval forces into action.
Truman had done more than simply order troops into action. This wasn't going to be an American war. This would be a police action by the forces of the United Nations against communist aggression. It happened that the Soviets were boycotting the UN Security Council and so were not around. Brian Urquhart has been with the United Nations Secretariat for more than 30 years.
In that particular case, the United Nations, in the absence of the Soviet Union, took a decision which was, in fact, the policy of the United States. Certainly, well, I don't think that will ever happen again.
An American president had effectively gone to war without congressional approval. That would happen again. President Truman appointed General Douglas MacArthur commander of the United Nations forces. MacArthur succeeded brilliantly, pushing all the way to the Chinese border. He wanted to go on. The Chinese were watching closely. Hundreds of thousands of troops were ready to strike. Liang Quan-shui was one of them.
Every day in Chengdu, there wwere discussions. The topic was American imperialism, was just a paper tiger, and it was nothing, powerless.
Zhang Hongjin, a doctor, volunteered to join the Chinese army.
They said the Americans had already come to the Yellow River. They had crossed the Yellow River. They would be close to Ottoman and coming to our territory into China. So they told us to go and help Korea.
We received a kind of warning through the Indian ambassador.
If the United States is going to cross the parallel and expand the war, and China not sit back and with folded hands, but the United government ignore the warning.
At Wake Island, General MacArthur told President Truman that he did not think the Chinese would intervene, but that if they did, there would be a mass slaughter at the Yalu River, that it wouldn't make much military difference even if they did. Well, on both counts, we were wrong.
The Chinese, just as they had warned, streamed across the border, pushing the Americans back. American troops were caught off guard by the massive Chinese attack. Casualties among Marines who at one point were surrounded were extremely heavy. Finding himself overwhelmed, MacArthur stepped up his demand that the U.S. open a general war against China, even to the point of using nuclear weapons. Harry Truman recognized a reality that would haunt every American president to come. There were limits, even to U.S. power. MacArthur was adamant, taking his case directly to the American public. Truman fired him. It was not a popular move. MacArthur returned to a hero's welcome. Cheering crowds reflected the American appetite for clear victory. That there were limitations to what a superpower with an atomic arsenal could do was too frustrating. Without a war against China, a traditional victory in Korea was impossible. And if you couldn't fight to win against the communists, how would it ever end? What America had determined by now was that it wasn't going to return to isolationism. By 1952, we were in Europe, we were in Asia.